I'll start with a pretty simple fact. There's no point in filling a leaky bucket with water. Now here, our bucket is World of Warcraft and the water is us, the players. Filling the bucket is like launching an expansion with all those millions of marketing dollars, and patches are what keeps the bucket from leaking. Now take a look at this. This is the number of guilds who defeated the final raid boss within that raid boss's season during WoW's healthiest times, most of Legion and then later BFA. You can see here that the bucket isn't super leaky. And here's Shadowlands, where leaky doesn't even do it justice. The water is gushing out of the bucket, and that represents WoW really at its least healthy. So, now that we've got Season 3 and we can draw the trend line, it is time to investigate. And of course, today's sponsor. Raycon. This holiday season, you can get premium audio and power tech at an awesome price and save even more by going to buyraycon.com/bellular to get another 15% off site-wide. Now, of course, the everyday earbuds are what really put them on the map for audio. They've since expanded into home tech and power tech. I especially like the PowerPad Pro for just nailing wireless charging and the really handy 180 charging cable. Now, going back to the everyday earbuds, these look, feel, and sound fantastic. They are dead comfy in the ear. There's no dangly stems. I just really like the look of them. They stay in super solid all day. I'll shake my head about, they'll be in. And the battery life, 8 hours of playtime with a 32-hour battery life overall with the case. 8 hours is a hell of a lot more than the, ones I've been used to in the past. They're hitting the specifications that I want at often half of what other comparable buds from other brands cost. And of course, you've got the premium build with the water and the sweat resistance, which handles that delightful Northern Irish weather that does try to interrupt me, say, listening to audiobooks when I go for a big old walk. Now, as for everything else, you've got all the creature comforts coming with a wireless charging case, of course, cable, 5 pairs of silicone tips so that you can find the best possible fit for that ideal passive noise isolation, tens of thousands of 5-star reviews, free returns, shipping, buy now, pay later options if that's what you want as well, and of course, dead handy to just get a real handy gift sorted. So you can go to buyraycon.com/bellular and there you'll get 15% off site-wide. So cheers Raycon, check them out, and let's get into the video. We'll kick it off with the raid then. So our data is gathered from Raider.io, and that is actually directly from Blizzard's Armory API. And that means that this is actual real Blizzard data. That's the really key thing. Now what we're able to track here is the number of guild kills per boss. So pugs, non-guild groups. No, we actually cannot track those, but while I'm sure they are a large number, and they'll become relevant later on in the video, World of Warcraft is an MMO, and therefore, more than anything, guild play represents its beating heart. All data for today's video is for week 1 and 2 of the season, minus Asian realms. Okay, week 1. Here are the first boss kills in Vault versus Aberrus versus Emir Drasil for week 1. This targets, of course, the most active slice of World of Warcraft's player base, and yeah, you can see a bit of a decline. However, that is completely normal. Expansions bring people back, patches mostly serve to keep them from leaving. Again, think of that analogy of the leaky bucket, and that's where things are incredible. Emir Drasil only dropped 8.84% in first boss kills from Aberrus. That is hardly anything. Historically speaking, that is an extremely healthy number for World of Warcraft, and it shows that active guilds are sticking around. Back in Shadowlands, we were talking about more like 50% drops, not 8% drops. Now, the drop from Vault to Aberrus was 18%. That's larger, but it being larger is normal. Vault was the start of the expansion. That's where the game would have the most players to lose. Next then, let's take a look at clear rates on a per boss basis for week 1 of each of this expansion's rates. Did you find Emir Drasil normal to be a little bit easier? If so, no wonder, because that's exactly what our data shows. Versus Vault, Emir Drasil and Aberrus have far higher week 1 clear rates. The steep line in Vault shows slower progress, and Emir Drasil's sort of shallow, less spiky line with only the final 2 bosses stepping up the challenge, well, that shows that it is easier, and it's a pattern that's much like Aberrus normal mode as well. Anecdotally, I can say that, like my team, we cleared both raids within 2 raid nights on normal mode, but for Emir Drasil, it was far easier, especially comparing Farak to Sarkareth. When this is translated into week 1 numbers, we see a clear rate that's wild. 8,618 guilds defeated Farak in week 1 normal mode, a 62% increase from Aberrus, which itself was a 2,300 kill increase from Vault. Yeah, that's a lot. Blizzard clearly does intend normal mode to be easier now than in the past. And that's kind of where data is our problem, because what changes the most whenever a normal mode gets easier? Pug clear rates or guild clear rates? Obviously, I don't have data for pugs, so I can't tell you, but surely pickup groups, pugs, surely they, which aren't in our data, are going to disproportionately benefit from normal mode being easier. So I would suspect those pug clear rates are way up. Overall then, expect 90% guild clear rates as we move forward, really for normal mode just in general. Now, many will still say to me that normal mode doesn't matter, that heroic and mythic are the real game. But here's the thing, normal is where people get their start. I think of the days of Icecrown Citadel 10 player, the easiest way to play ICC, all the way back in 2009 and 10 when that's the thing I was doing. ICC 10 was the gateway drug that got loads of people into raiding. So, give people a good time in normal mode and you'll create more heroic raiders. In our last video, I talked about clear rates and player attention, and one of the patterns we could see was that higher clear rates seem to lead to higher first boss kills in the next tier, basically retention. Blizzard's data clearly backs this up. Why else would they continue the intentionally easier tuning of normal mode as we've moved from Aberrus to Emirdrasil? Heroic mode then. First boss kills in week 1 increased by 2.37% from Emirdrasil. This really is quite incredible. I wouldn't say that this represents a growth or a complete, lack of losing players. I think this rather represents people clearing normal mode a bit faster and then being able to try the first 1 or 2 bosses in what remains of their final raid night of week 1. But still, this probably does bode well. As for our overall heroic mode clear rates, those are interesting. Razageth died 144 times to guilds in her first week. Sarkareth died 10,014 times, and Farak on heroic 895 times. So Sarkareth's 604% increase shows what we all felt, that Sarkareth was way easier than Razageth, but Farak does seem to be a slight step up from Sark on this mode. But of course, big picture, this is an 11.74% decrease in the final boss kill number from Season 3 to 2. But that obviously pales in comparison to the 604% increase that we saw from Season 1 to 2, so absolutely we are still in the same territory of very high clear rates. And glancing back to our entire season-long data from last time, Aberrus Heroic had a clear rate of 78.25%. Only Nighthold and Nyalotha come close to that, and those were both raids that happened in periods of WoW that were doing, by the numbers anyway, fairly decently. As we go a little bit more granular, we can see the per boss clear rates. They are a little bit steeper than with Aberrus, but absolutely it does represent more than with Vault. We could have just rolled with week 1 numbers, but overall we just wanted to wait a little bit extra just to see how the data would shake out. And really the difference that you see in normal mode is the final boss kills being a bit smaller in week 2 than in Aberrus, but that kind of does make sense because Emirdrasil normal Farak kills were very front loaded compared to Sarkareth, where for many people just getting into the next reset and getting that extra bit of loot, that's what got them the kill. So clearly, we are just seeing the same trends continue from week 1 as we move into week 2. Emirdrasil Normal has what is almost certainly the highest early clear rate in WoW's history for a raid. Its week 2 clear rate is in fact higher than some other raids across their entire tier. Now, as I move on to heroic mode, again, you kind of see what we would expect. The TLDR here is that Emirdrasil is performing like Aberrus. And overall, from all that we've been able to gather, that seems like a very good thing for World of Warcraft's health. I'll just touch Mythic quickly. So our Boss 1 participation is down 21.63% from Aberrus, but it had boss numbers that were 54.34% higher than Vault. Overall, I think this is just kind of reflecting like difficulty, guild progress. We kind of went into a lot of detail in Mythic in the prior video in this series, where Mythic overall has been pretty stable. Anyway, the walls in Yggdrasil do seem to hit a little bit harder than an Aberrus though, because you actually see the per boss clear rates of Yggdrasil being a little bit easier than Aberrus, but only for a while, because with Tindral, 0.24% had defeated that boss by week 2, while 1.22% had defeated Echo of Neltharion. So yeah, fairly interesting. Shooting into the race, and there's some interesting data for that later, it is clear that people are pretty pumped about the raid. I mean, Liquid's leader Max said that this is the best raid they've made in a long time in his opinion. That's a sentiment that I've seen a lot of people agree with. Normal mode was a fun bash just to, get some gear, feel out some bosses. On Heroic, I have really loved what I've played so far. I'm actively looking forward to next raid night quite a bit more than I actually had in the past. Okay, let's talk about the race. Yggdrasil was an incredible race. It was so down to the wire. By the end, both guilds were having sub 2% pulls. Now, that translated to peak viewers just shy of 390,000. That clobbers the Vault race, which was 184k. No doubt, of course, helped by just the story of this raid being so good with how tight it was at the end. Now, I'm currently using moderated numbers from esports charts, which for some reason is missing Aberrus and Sanctum, but otherwise it does go back to Nyalotha, which is quite nice. And they combine the stats of Liquid, Max, Echo, Method, and Gingy. I know that isn't everybody, but at least it's kind of like for like. Anyway, here they are. Sepulchre of the first one is obviously the king of watch time, but that's because there was 441 hours of airtime. Rip casters. That was a legendarily long race. What is impressive though is just the peak that Yggdrasil is. Average viewers are shockingly level with Vault, even with Yggdrasil having 50 more hours of airtime, so more airtime but holding a similar average viewer count, which is very healthy. And outside of Sepulchre of the first one, which is clearly an outlier, Yggdrasil is the most watched race to World First in this dataset. And that truly is something to be happy about. This race does seem to be growing. During the race, I mean, WoW was the second most watched game on Twitch, and then, of course, Season of Discovery, that has also peaked some records. As I talked about in a recent Warcraft news episode, Season of Discovery has actually eclipsed peak Twitch viewership of every classic release outside of the original classic release, which is extremely impressive. Let's, though, talk a bit about Mythic Plus. Alright, so massive credit to Nightstalker, very long time viewer of the channel. He's an absolute whiz with data. So he has actually been doing some manual data collection from Raider.io, and he shared his findings with me. So just to compare weeks 1 and 2 of Mythic Plus for Season 2 and Season 3, this is what we get. Season 2 opened with 2,518,779 runs, and then 2,167,312 in week 2, right? So 2.5 million and kind of more like 2.2 million. Season 3 opened with 3,227,287, followed by 2,645,137. So, I know, very big numbers, but basically, the Season 3 numbers are larger, which is quite impressive. Nightstalker also, this is amazing, he compiled run and timed run numbers, calculating the ratio of runs done in time. And in a move that I think is perhaps echoing some things we've seen with raid difficulty, we kind of see this, where Season 2's week 1 and 2 average clear rates were 80.09% and 78.1%. Season 3's, however, are 84.2% and 85.6%. So overall, we are seeing more runs and a higher percentage of those runs being in time. And furthering him being a data legend, he also broke it all down per week, per dungeon for Season 3, and I just thought this was quite interesting. So week 1, Fortified Week, had a Tal Dazar at a whopping 95.7% like in-time ratio, but Morzon's Rise was only 68.7%. So yeah, that very much explains those nerfs. To go big picture, Mythic Plus obviously de-emphasized affixes, it focused in on the dungeons, Blizzard have been fairly quick to tune in general, there's no seasonal affix, and there's a totally new pool of dungeons every single season. I mean, this time, there are 6 non-Dragonflight dungeons, whereas in the past, we would have been doing this. You would have been still in the sanguine depths. I know, a horrific prospect. Clearly then, these changes are actually working quite well. I think it's no wonder then that Blizz in a post-expansion announcement interview like just a few weeks ago said they will be continuing to keep the focus on the dungeons over the affixes. So, Mythic Plus, early data, looks very positive indeed. To break down the big picture then, the story of Dragonflight is one about repair, not one of growth, and that is what WoW needs. As I said at the top of the video, it is the analogy of the leaky bucket. There's no point releasing new expansions that are all big hype if the bucket is leaky. We kind of talked about this sort of thing to death, and while the metrics that I can track here, they're not enough to confirm the suspicion that Dragonflight has succeeded, but they absolutely do point in that direction. Blizzard's experiments with Mythic Plus raid and gearing really do seem to have paid off. I cannot track world content, but I've got to imagine that its better state now is feeding in fairly positively. Of course, in the next expansion, we will add delves to that picture, and we'll be breaking down a bunch of restrictions with warbands. I think the combination of those will be very positive, and I really hope that warband stuff will be in the Blizzard Armory API, because then, if we could track warbands, oh boy, by the data, we would be cooking. What I believe from this is that WoW, as a game, can actually grow, and that the efforts to repair it have worked. We cannot teleport to where we want to be exactly, but I am confident that the game is now walking along the right track. I'm glad you stopped by. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and a special thanks to our members over at bellular.ghost.io. Not only do they provide us with vital support, but they also get videos like this early. They get a raft of exclusive content as well, like the Lore Walking podcast. You can check that out too. But till then, I'll see you in the next video.